This morning we have a text from Proverbs. We don't often read from Proverbs. Wisdom literature in the Bible. If you know there's a time for everything, that's what Proverbs. Maxims about telling you how to live. But this is kind of an unusual text because it's more of a speech, a first-person speech. Whenever I read it, I always think, wow, this is very empowering. This sounds like I'm taking over as a creator. So think about it when I say I, think about you too, that you're in this narrative. So, does not wisdom call and understanding raise her voice on the heights beside the way? At the crossroads she takes her stand, beside the gates in front of the town. At the entrance to the portals she cries out, "To you, O people, I call, and my cry is to all who live. O simple ones, learn prudence and acquire intelligence, you who lack it. Hear, for I will speak of noble things, from my lips will come what is right, for my mouth will utter truth. Take my instruction instead of silver, and knowledge rather than gold, because wisdom is better than all the jewels, and all that you may desire cannot compare with her." She goes on to talk about creation. God created me at the beginning of the creation. The first of God's acts long ago, ages ago, I was set up. At the beginning, before the earth, where there were no depths, I was brought forth. Where there were no springs abounding with water. Before the mountains had been shaped and before the hills, I was brought forth. Doesn't that remind you of Isaac Watts' great hymn of, "Before the hills in order stood, or earth received her frame"? Wisdom goes on, God had not yet bent the earth, the fields, or the world's first bits of soil. When God established the heavens, I was there, and he drew a circle on the face of the deep. God made the firm of the skies above, and then he established the fountains of the deep. He signed the sea its limits, so that water might not transgress his command. I was there beside God like a masterworker, and I was daily God's delight, playing before him, playing in God's inhabited world and delighting in all the human race. That ends the reading. Yesterday there were nearly 2,000 marches across this country, and many, many more around the world. We heard voices shouting, "No kings! No kings!" And they were at the first in Maine and many towns across America. They were at busy intersections, stopping traffic. They were covering at least 10 blocks in New York City along Fifth Avenue. They were at the Lincoln Memorial shouting, "Shame, shame, shame." I even saw that folks from Bainbridge Island crowded onto a ferry that began to tip. There were so many of them, en route to Seattle to join the protest. And they're the largest crowd gathering in Philly, 80,000 there at that Love Park and the steps of the Philadelphia Art Museum. Mostly peaceful protests, even here in Denver. How many of you all got out in the heat? Maybe you marched to some of the other ones around the metro area, but they were mostly peaceful marches. But in downtown Chicago, the marchers had a standoff with the police. There was opposition from the Proud Boys in Atlanta that brought tear gas. In LA, there was more disorder and firing of rubber bullets and tear gas, a city that has been protesting ICE raids for a week now. And then due to the political assassinations in Minnesota, the No Kings protests were all canceled as grief and fear spread. As we know, protesters are raising their voices against immigration, crack down against the federal spending cuts and the abusive power of military. And all the while calling for a return to democracy and waving U.S. flags and proclaiming the goodness within this country, in spite of what it looks like. They were challenging systems that venerate crowns and kings and neglecting the cries of the poor and the immigrants. So I think wisdom was there in the streets, crying out. There we hear it in Proverbs, the wisdom, the Hebrew word, chokmah, the feminine noun, or in Greek, wisdom, the feminine noun, Sophia. And this woman wisdom brings understanding as a teacher and very active verbs. She's not at the books, she is in the streets, she cries, she shouts, she takes her place at the gates and in the city square where business is done. Wisdom is not reserved to ivy towers or royal decrees or religious temples. It's not only in sacred texts, it is alive in all people. She says over and over again, all people who dare to speak the truth. Although we might not think of this passage in Proverbs as a text about ethics and justice, it is a text of public theology, of speaking truth into a world with authority, of reminding all passerbyers of the glorious prosperity there is with a just community, and not with wealth, and not with power. There's prosperity in a just and generous community. And you hear wisdom's sermon isn't like that of the prophets of old, where they're lamenting and they're crying and they're pointing fingers and they're warning and they're giving threats. No, she's not even saying that Israel is the chosen one. She's saying all people are a part of creation. She alone is what theologian Elizabeth Johnson says is a beneficent, right-ordering power in whom God delights. No one is excluded from wisdom's invitation. No one is overlooked, not the outsider, not the marginalized. She doesn't wait for us to come to her. She goes out there. She doesn't lie passively, waiting to be discovered by philosophers and scholars. Is wisdom calling you? Can you see her? What does she look like to you? Over the years, as I've read this passage and studied it and preached on it, I did kind of imagine what Sophia is, a personification of a woman, but not quite just a woman, something else. And I've often thought of wisdom as a muse. Now, before you start thinking of the stereotypical image of a muse, of an older man and a younger female, let me say in my mind's eye that Sophia is a spark of creativity and what motivates creation and what motivates people to speak. She is there in the beginning. She is what animates the creator. So don't think of Dante's Beatrice or Diego Rivera's Frida Kahlo. Don't think of that. Think of a muse in the world, a spirit, a wisdom, a Sophia. Do you remember in ancient Greek mythology, the muses? There are 9 goddesses, each presiding over a different art or science, epic poetry, history, astrology, dance, sensual poetry. They're the daughters of Zeus and Mnemosyne, who is memory. Zeus and memory have these 9 daughters, and they are invoked at the beginning of classical poems, sources of divine inspiration. To be inspired in ancient Greece was to be visited by a muse. A friend of mine went to Greece about 30 years ago. I've hung on to this t-shirt for a long time because it holds some kind of meaning for me, because this is the sculpture of the 9 muses in Greece. But if you notice it, there's not 9, there's 8. So the person wearing it is the 9th muse. So I want us to think about that for ourselves and how we are part of this ongoing creation. Back in January, in the deep of the cold winter, when the new administration was putting itself into power, I joined a group of progressive Christians, faith seekers, in a conference that had already been planned in St. Simon Islands, Georgia. It's called the Southern Lights. It meets there every year. Diana Butler Bass and Brian McLaren and some other people were there to pause, to think, to reflect about what it means to speak about faith in a time like this. And many of us were still reeling from the election results, not certain what to make of it, feeling like it was the end of times. What had we missed? What had gone wrong? And you know, they didn't come with answers. They didn't come with simple things or platitudes or a way forward. But we joined in a conversation where we tried to figure out, what does it mean to be faithful in a time like this? And since then, I've been following Diana Butler's Sunday musings. And she writes this about Proverbs. Joy and justice aren't two separate things. They're woven into creation and crafted by wisdom into the cosmos. Joy and justice are expressions of a playful God. And she writes, and I think often we feel this because we're so compelled to do justice in the world and to show up in places of difficulty. Justice seems distance, an impossibility, heavy work. The arc is long and the world aches for justice, but the woman wisdom helps us breathe. Just breathe. Because her justice is a part of the fabric of a rightly ordered world. How Sophia joins with God and with humankind. She teaches us to dance in the universe, to stand as voices where there is not light and life, and to speak something other. So in a time where we're told to choose sides, this or that, the Sophia and the Muses remind us to choose instead depth. Not to choose right or left, but to choose depth. To choose wonder, to choose to breathe, to choose each other, to choose community, to continue in the slow and sacred labor of building a world in which all can flourish. So let us be a people of holy protest and holy poetry. Let us march and make art. Let us chant and build. And let us stand at the gates here at 6th Avenue and Adams and lift our voices until the world is reordered in love. May this wisdom and this fire and this inspiration, this animating, burn bright in this community. And may we know justice and beauty are not opposites, but allies. Where truth is heard and dignity is honored, and everyone has a place at this table. Amen. May it be so.